As we all know, Season 2 of Helluva has officially concluded after just over 2 years. After Season 1 finished, I reviewed every episode in a dedicated video, so it's that time again where I sit down and compare and contrast every episode of the season, to see which episodes I liked, loved or hated. I think a lot of viewers will agree with me that their opinions on some episodes will have changed after multiple rewatches, so I think it's only fair to mention what my original opinion of the episodes were back when I first reviewed them. There was also 4 shorts that were released as well, so I'll review them after episode 12, so make sure to stick around for that. Just for anyone who's unaware, the episodes will be ranked on a tier list ranging from S to A, S being my absolute favourite episodes, C and D being somewhat decent in the middle, and E being the worst. Let's get right into it. Starting off Season 2, we have The Circus. It's pretty good, and I feel like it aged better with time. With all of what we've seen in previous episodes, it's easier to appreciate some of the flashback scenes. It was great seeing Blitz and Stolas' early childhood and finding out about Stolas' arranged marriage. The song at the end of the episode was wonderful and foreshadowed what will happen later in the series. The animation quality was also a huge upgrade compared to Season 1, and this continues throughout the rest of Season 2. At the time of the episode's release, I reviewed it and I enjoyed it, and I don't think my opinion has changed. However, after its release, The Circus was quite controversial. Personally, I never really understood the drama. I love Stella as a villain, so finding out more about why she ticks was great to see. I didn't see Blitz and Stolas' childhood as a retcon, and I think it was a good way of fleshing out their backstories, especially with Blitz and his history at the circus. There are a couple of things I think that bring the episode down slightly. Firstly, I think we could have got a bit more development between Stolas and Paimon. Paimon was similar to Cash Buxo in that he doesn't really respect his son, but in a different way from Cash. We never found out what happened to Paimon or the rest of Stolas' family, which I think was a huge missed opportunity. Cash Buxo's voice just doesn't fit him in my opinion. I think if they gave him a more raspy voice, like as if he smoked, I think that would have fit him better. The Circus is a decent start to the season, it's going in A tier. When I originally reviewed Seeing Stars in 2022, I called it a flawed masterpiece, but after a rewatch, I'd call it a missed opportunity. So the episode has some great emotional moments, like the scene with Luna's adoption or the end talk between Luna and Octavia. However, it's weighed down by nearly 15 minutes of LA jokes and poor pacing. If you don't live in LA or have visited there, you won't get most of the jokes, nor will you think they're particularly funny. I'm not sure why they invested so heavily in that being the punchline. 1 or 2 jokes would have been perfectly fine, but by the 20th, they've long outlived their welcome. I think if this episode instead fully locked in on the emotional stuff and focused on us finding out why Luna was put in the adoption centre, how Blitz adopted her, and some character building between Octavia and Luna, I think this would have been one of the best episodes of the entire show. However, it's stuck in this midway point where it can't decide if it wants to be moving and sentimental or if it wants to be le random XD humour. Moxie and Millie's part in the episode was totally pointless. Their song cuts in out of nowhere and is extremely jarring. It doesn't really push the plot forward in any meaningful way, and it was yet another duet between the pair, which we had 2 of already by that point. The pacing would have improved significantly if their scenes and song were removed, and we got more development for Octavia and Luna or Stolas and Blitz. The end scene is made a bit worse after what happens in Sinsmas. A lot of fans have stated that Octavia basically forgot this scene. The explanation is that she's a teenager, so she of course makes mistakes. But it's definitely a bit of a shame that we have these moments that go to waste later. Blitz even word for word says what Luna says, but to Stolas, so they clearly remembered this scene. I mentioned this heavily during my original review, and it's still completely true. This episode has extremely inconsistent animation. With the benefit of hindsight and seeing how great later episodes look, it's abundantly clear that the vast majority of Seeing Stars was animated by new animators who weren't familiar with Vivzie's style. The opening segment is especially bad. There's no shadows, the character models are completely off and have widely varying dimensions. The frame rate is choppy and it's just a huge downgrade compared to The Circus. Helluva is a fantastic looking show, but it's when you see an episode like Seeing Stars with so many issues it makes you appreciate the other episodes a lot more. Seeing Stars was a letdown in my opinion and goes into E tier. It's my least favourite episode of the show so far. Moving on to episode 3, we have X's and O's. This episode takes place in the Greed Ring and focuses in on Moxie in particular. Similarly to Seeing Stars, I wasn't a fan of this episode when it came out, and after a rewatch, my opinion has stayed largely the same. I can really see how this episode could have been fantastic, but a couple bizarre choices hold it back and it just falls apart as a result. I'll start with the good. The animation was broadly really good this episode. The varying transitions, effects and battle scenes were fantastic, definitely a step up from Seeing Stars. Crimson as a character is pretty engaging, he's got a lot of personality and aura. The flashback sequence was my favourite part and we found out about Moxie's backstory. It was heart-wrenching on a first watch and it still is. But that's where the positives end, unfortunately. X's and O's, just like with Seeing Stars, suffers from not knowing whether to focus on being wacky goofy comedy or actual proper development that makes you feel for the characters. The best example of this is some of the scenes with Crim, especially that flashback. It was an incredibly deep moment, and if the rest of the episode felt like that, it would have been one of the best episodes in the series. However, the tone is completely ruined by the gags with the dildos in the office and some of the bizarre writing. It's just very jarring for the viewer to watch an emotional scene about Moxie's upbringing, his abusive father and his mum dying, only for it to be tossed aside in favour of a sex joke. Linked in with the tonal issues is Chaz. I just don't like him at all. None of his jokes land, the background track that plays when he speaks is incredibly annoying, and his song can be summed up as mid. There was no need for him to be in the episode either. They could have went down the route of Krim trying to get Moxie into the mob for any other number of reasons. The entire plot with the wedding just didn't need to exist, and like I mentioned before, if it's instead focused on being emotional, deep and tense, it would have been superb. It's a shame because Crimson was teased way back in 2020 and looked to be an interesting villain, but the poor execution of X's and O's damaged his character and makes him one of the lesser compelling villains in the show's lineup. For all of the things I've listed, I'm putting X's and O's in E tier. It had the makings of something great, but just fumbled in my opinion, unfortunately. I actually liked Western Energy. I'll get the main thing out of the way first. I personally really like Edward Bosco as Stryker. I loved Norman Reedus, but Edward does just as good of a job. I remember a lot of fans freaking out over the change and saying that Stryker was ruined, and even now I just don't understand that. The character sounds virtually identical, so I think Edward nailed the role. The scenes with Stella and Andre were great, and also the end fight scene with Moxie, Millie and Stryker. The main thing that holds this episode back is the B-plot. Just like with the previous two, I don't think the B-plot was needed at all. Luna and Blitz's trip to the hospital was completely pointless. The writing as well felt particularly weak during that entire sequence. Blitz was swearing for no reason and just didn't feel necessary. At least in my eyes, I think it would have been better if Blitz went on the mission to save Stolas with Moxie and Millie, and then we got them meeting with Stolas being injured. This would alter the end sequence with Stolas in the hospital, but it wouldn't be too difficult to keep that emotional part intact. The animation was on point during Western Energy, so no complaints there. Like I said, the main issue was just the pacing, some of the dialogue and that B-plot. As a result, it's going in C tier. It's not a bad episode at all, but it's just missing a couple of things that would elevate it above a C in my opinion. At this point, it's pretty clear to me that so far Season 2 is off to a rocky start, and unfortunately Episode 5 continues this trend. Unhappy Campers is broadly recognised as the most hated Helluva Boss episode, and I agree. When it came out, I had some criticisms, but as time has went on, the things I liked about the episode have decreased, and after a rewatch I have more to say. So let's start with the good. I think it was great to see another mission. The mission episodes are always great fun, especially when they go to the human world. It was nice to see Moxie take charge for once, and the human disguises led to a couple funny gags. We also had the reveal of Barbie Wire, who was an interesting character with a cute design and a wonderful voice actor. As I said, the episode starts to fall apart pretty quickly. A running trend with the past few episodes is the pacing issues linked to the A and B plot. Unhappy Campers inherits this flaw as well. The reveal of Barbie Wire and all of Blitz's scenes felt a bit underutilized. The episode either should have went all in on Barbie and Blitz or solely on Moxie and Millie. It's put itself in this halfway house where it neither satisfies fans wanting some development for Barbie and Blitz, nor for the people wanting some serious development for Millie. Some people even called Unhappy Campers a Moxie episode in disguise, which fits pretty well. Blitz's story either should have been the A-plot and the main focus, or it should have been cut off and moved later in the story to its own dedicated segment. Unhappy Campers follows the trend of previous episodes where Millie doesn't really get as much development as we'd like to see. However, it retreads old ground, being that Moxie is humiliated the entire time. Speaking of Moxie, he feels a bit out of place in this one. The way he acts just doesn't fit him, considering we've seen him grow and develop for an entire season and a half before this. A lot of his scenes come across as cringe, and you feel a bit uncomfortable watching them. Lastly, there's nothing else really noteworthy about the episode. There's very few cool details, the songs are forgettable, and like I said, the embarrassing dialogue makes it a bit difficult to sit through on repeat viewings. Unhappy Campers is definitely the weakest episode, especially considering how wasted the sister reveal felt. Such a huge part of Blitzo's lore, and all of it felt thrown away. It's going in E tier. We're at the halfway point of the season and we get a big return to form with the release of Oops. I think a lot of people will agree with me that the previous few episodes had a couple of things that held them back. However, Oops brought back a lot of fan favourite characters and reminded everyone of why they loved the series so much. One thing that plagued previous episodes was that inconsistent pacing and the B-plot. Those don't exist in Oops. It's written extremely well with a great blend of funny jokes, character development and emotional scenes. The flashbacks with Fizz and Blitz give context to their history together, further getting you invested in what's going on. This culminates in that fight at the end and the beautiful hug between the two. There was some great character building going on, and it's what everyone loves to see. Fizz and Ozzy's interactions were also a huge breath of fresh air. They're funny, cute, and have so much chemistry together. There isn't a single moment where I'd say the bit went on too long or that they outlived their welcome. If people weren't fans of them during Ozzy's, I think they will be after Oops. Even the returning villains were great. Stryker and Crimson were better here than in their first appearances in Season 2. Oops is a ton of fun, easy A tier. Continuing on from Oops, we have yet another Fizz and Ozzy episode, and just like Oops, it's fantastic. Except I'd say that Mammon Special is not only my favourite episode of season 2, but of the entire show so far. The writing is hilarious, the pacing is flawless, and all of the new characters are memorable. Right off the bat, Mammon is the star of the show in my opinion. He's my favourite character and just radiates so much personality. Michael Cusack knocked the ball out of the park with his performance, it's genuinely amazing. He's meant to be a villain, but I just fell in love with him, he's just such a joy to watch on screen. The secondary antagonists, being Glitz and Glam, fit in extremely well. They're antagonistic, but they don't get on your nerves or become annoying, unlike past characters such as Chaz. I especially love Zach Hadel's little screams in the background. Only Plays watchers will immediately recognise them, and it makes it so much more fun on a second rewatch to hear Zach screaming the entire time. Music-wise, 7 is surreal. Juggling is cool, Glitz and Glam's song and Fizz's are all spectacular. The only song I'm a bit iffy about is Crooked, and that's just down to the way Ozzy's audio sounds in the song. It's far from bad, and even without it, there's still plenty of other fun tracks to improve the episode. Mammon Special is everything I wanted out of the series. I called it a masterpiece at the time, and it still is. It's going in S tier. For a change of pace, Full Moon instead focuses on Stolitz, with the return of the Dorks Asians and Shrubs. Personally, I think this is a solid episode. It has a couple fun gags and moves the plot forward in a real way, especially with that end sequence with Stolitz giving Blitz the Asmodean Crystal. This is down to personal preference, but I think Full Moon would have been better if they went all in with the Stolitz stuff. The fight with the Shrubs was great, don't get me wrong, but it was a little jarring going from the silly goofy fun right into that relationship focused segment at the end. The Stolitz duet at the start was great, but that's the only song of the episode. The ending felt quite abrupt, but I think after subsequent rewatches it's deliberate. The deafening silence makes you rethink what happened, and it's far more compelling. I think as well with Full Moon, it didn't really get the chance to shine since instead of set up feature plot points around Stolitz. It did its best with the runtime. Full Moon is perfectly fine, it's going in B tier. Apology Tour takes up right where Full Moon ended, carrying on the central Stolitz plot. I liked this episode when it came out and I still like it. There's no crazy plot, enemies to fight or people to save. It's just Blitz and Stolitz developing as characters. It was sweet to see Blitz apologise to some of the people he screwed over, especially Verosika, and I like that plot twist with Mayberry and Martha. Stolitz's song in the middle is especially sweet. Stolitz is always great at explaining his emotions through music, and this one was no different. The highlight of the episode for me is probably Drunk Stolitz. He's still polite when he's drunk, which melts my heart. Apology Tour is a great episode, it's going in A tier. Episode 10 takes a break from the Stolitz action, to instead being a mission-focused episode with Millie and Blitz. Overall, I liked episode 10, but it didn't blow my socks off or anything. The plot is alright, the main villain Rolando is decent, but it's not particularly compelling. You'll watch the episode once and forget about most of it. What really elevates it in my opinion is the second half. It's packed full of character development for Millie and Blitz, especially with all of the flashback sequences. We see the founding of Imp, a bit of Millie's old life, and some reflection on her as a character. It's the Millie episode fans have been asking for since season 1. Blitz doesn't get left out either, that scene with his mother is heartbreaking. Although I wouldn't consider it a B-plot, it's fun just seeing Moxie and Luna together. I think they work well as a pair with their clashing personalities. The end scene with Luna giving Moxie some ice cream just emphasises this, it's cozy. I'd say episode 10 is like Full Moon. It develops the plot, but it's not the story you're going to get super invested in. It serves its purpose, it's decent fun, and it advances the plot forward. It's going in B tier. Mastermind is a hugely hyped episode, continuing on that Stolitz plot while having the long-awaited introduction of the rest of the sins. It's a banger. I said the same thing when I first reviewed it, but this episode is fantastic. It's like Mammon's where it has everything you could want in an episode. It has emotional moments, gritty drama, fun memorable songs, and a conclusion that leaves you on the edge of your seat. There's a couple of characters who really stand out. The first is Satan. His voice, design, and personality are all spot on. They blend into this intimidating character who's genuinely tough, but clearly puts it on a bit to maintain appearances. I especially love his companion Yogurt, they make a great duo. Mammon as always was hilarious, all of his lines are laugh out loud moments, his design is awesome and he's easily got the most personality out of all of the sins. The Stolitz and Blitz duet in the middle was riveting. On the topic of Stolitz and Blitz, a bit like with Oops, I think if people weren't into Stolitz, this episode might have changed their opinion on that. The status quo really changes here, the ending being the best example. There's so much chemistry between the two characters and it's very complex. There are two minor problems I have with the episode. Firstly, I think Visago was underutilised. He didn't have as much of a presence as I thought he would, and maybe his reveal should have been saved for another episode. Added to this, I think B and Ozzy were a bit out of character. I discussed this in my original review, but they probably should have taken more of a stance to protect IMP and Stolitz. Other than that though, Mastermind is one of the best episodes in the entire show so far, and the second best of season 2. It's joining Mammon Special in S tier. And now it's time for the epic conclusion of season 2. All of the plot points that previous episodes have been setting up has been for Sinsmas. Helluva Boss was on a roll with the second half of the season, Sinsmas is no exception, being another banger. A couple of the main reveals being Stolitz being confirmed, Millie's pregnancy and Octavia leaving. Sinmas has a great blend of some of the most emotional and sad scenes in the entire show thus far, contrasting with some hilarious moments. One example being Stel and Andre or Stullis working at IMP. The writing is solid, the music is phenomenal, and it has a satisfying ending. Although things don't end up the way we'd ultimately had hoped, Stullis and Blitz are finally together, and it's now a blank slate for Season 3 to start from. Like with a lot of episodes this season, your mileage will vary based on if you're big into Stulitz or hate it entirely. I like it, so Sinmas is right up my alley. As for the criticisms, it's mainly just down to personal preference and how we'd want characters to act. Octavia has made mistakes, and it confused a lot of viewers, especially after the events of Seeing Stars. But she's a teenager, and there's a lot of other complex mechanics at play here. I hope by the end of Season 3 or 4 we get something similar to Blitz's vision of the group sitting together at Christmas, but only time will tell. Just like with Mastermind, Sinmas is a banger. It's my third favourite episode of Season 2, and it's going in S tier. So that's all of the main episodes ranked, but that's not where it ends, since we also got 4 shorts. Let's rank them as well. Hell's Bells gives us a fun day out with Sally, May and Millie. After a rewatch, I still enjoy it. It's a bit of wacky fun, but with that heart-to-heart scene towards the end. In my eyes, I think this short has extra relevance after Sinmas. I feel like if Millie is to take a break from her job at IMP while she's pregnant, the most logical person to fill in for her would be Sally May. I hope that's the case, but if not, this short was a decent first introduction to the format. It's going in B tier. Mission Antarctica sets the format for the next 3 shorts being missions. Throughout the season, a lot of fans wanted more missions, but since there was such a heavy emphasis on Stulitz or other characters, there wasn't much opportunity for any of these missions. These shorts are a way of filling that gap, I'd say. After a rewatch, I think that Mission Antarctica is the weakest out of the shorts and a bit forgettable. It's basically just IMP in a snowy area fighting a couple enemies with a few jokes. That's it. I think there would have been way better opportunities for other shorts that could have filled this gap, like Luna and Blitz having a day out or Fizz and Ozzy together. It's not bad, but just a missed opportunity. It's going in D tier. Up next is Mission Weeaboo. I've really enjoyed this one. I think Emberlyn is a funny character, and Blitz's reactions to someone more cringe than he is was a good laugh. The final joke being her appearing in hell was great too. I love her demonic design. I think the one issue holding Weeaboo back is that it's not particularly rewatchable. The jokes were definitely the funniest the first time, but it's not like some of the actual episodes of the show, such as Mammons, where it ages better on subsequent watches. Best short out of the 4 in my opinion, it's going in B tier. And last but not least, we have the final short, Mission Chupacabras. It's funnier than Mission Antarctica and has some better jokes, but it's nothing to really write home about. The highlight is Blitz's little goat companion, but I think a lot of people will agree with me that perhaps he should have came home with Blitz. We do see him become a cult leader at the very end, so fingers crossed he somehow reappears in a future episode or short. Not a bad short, but not my favourite either, it's going in C tier. So there you have it. That's every episode and short of Season 2 of Helluva Boss reviewed. If we take some time to look at my tier list, we can see a couple trends emerge. The first being that the episodes got better as the series went on. The first few were pretty poor, especially on Happy Campers, Seeing Stars and X's and O's. However, at the midway point of the season, things did a complete 180 and the episodes improved in both writing, humour and tone. Episodes centred around Moxie and Millie tend to be the worst on my tier list, whereas the Stulitz episodes, Fizz and Ozzy ones are at the top. This tier list was solely Season 2, but soon I'll be doing a video where I compare and contrast Season 1 to Season 2. It'll be a bit more focused, unlike in this ranking where I talk about every single episode. So that's everything. Do you agree with my takes? Is there any episodes you'd rank higher or lower on the tier list? I'd love to hear your thoughts on Season 2 down below. Thanks for watching.